Four of us young women were sharing a spacious 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building. None of us had met each other before, but an online hunt for accommodation in a metro city brought us together. It had been a month, everything was good, and we were still getting to know each other in the city. On a particular Sunday night, we all went to bed around 12:30 a.m. after a night out. Our room had 2 queen-size cots. In between the 2 cots were a small coffee table and a chair. At around 2:30 a.m. in the morning, I was abruptly awoken. I barely opened my eyes to see one of my roommates sitting on the chair with her hands on the coffee table. I was not really alarmed and casually asked her why she was up at this hour. I dozed back off to sleep before I could even hear the answer. The next morning, everybody was rushing to work since it was a Monday. I returned back home after a long day at around 9 p.m. One of my flatmates was watching TV and the other 2 were still not home. After talking about our day, she surprisingly asked me who was awake last night and kept turning the lights of the living room on and off. Given my experience of the previous night, I said it must be issue as I saw her sitting awake in the middle of the night. Almost half an hour after the 2 of us had this conversation, the other 2 flatmates also reached home. While we were all eating dinner, Issue looked at me and asked me why I'm always awake in the middle of the night and advised me to keep a bottle of water next to my bed. Shocked, I asked her to stop bluffing because I never wake up until I have snoozed my alarm a minimum of 3 times. I told her, "You are the one who was wide awake last night. You even disturbed the other 2 by fidgeting with the living room's light." Following this, I had the most creepy conversation of my life. Issue revealed that she has seen me sitting on the chair at the middle of the night multiple times, including last night. When she woke up and saw me like this, she asked what I was doing, and I apparently told her that I woke up to get water. After hearing my answer, she fell asleep. We also learned that the other 2 roommates also got disturbed by the lights at around the same time. One of them even noticed the presence of someone passing by in the dark. But that isn't even the worst part. Issue claimed to have seen me at least twice in the same position at the same time. This was the first time I noticed her sitting on the chair. After a little investigation, we learned from the neighbors that the house had remained unoccupied for over a year after the previous tenant passed away following a miscarriage. That piece of information was enough for us to believe that there was a 5th flatmate. Needless to say, we all vacated the place in less than a week. While I was living in a hostel during my 9th and 10th grade. There were 4 floors in our hostel and we were only 25 or 27 girls. The 4th floor remained empty, with only maids visiting once a month to clean up. Previously, there had been an occasion where one very quiet and simple girl had tried to commit suicide from the 4th floor. But owing to stress, we didn't make much of it. Back then, I had the habit of waking up at around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and study until breakfast. My roommate, on the other hand, would stay up till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and wake me up before she goes to bed. On one such night, my roommate woke me up and I saw that she had gone completely pale and her eyes were bloodshot red. I asked her what was wrong and she said nothing and slept off. I thought she must have had a fight with her boyfriend and went to study. But all that time that I was studying, I kept feeling that somebody was watching me. It made me so afraid that I closed my books and went off to sleep. The next morning, I asked her what was wrong and she curtly said, "Nothing, I got to go." After that, she kept ignoring me, and when I finally confronted her, she told me the creepiest story I have ever heard. She told me that she was studying as per usual at around 12 to 12:30-ish. The timing is creepy because the previous suicide also took place the same day. She decided to make coffee for herself, and on her way back to the room, she felt like somebody was following her. She turned around and saw me. She noticed I wasn't wearing my spectacles or flip-flops or the small black thread my mother tied around my hand. She didn't make much of it, but asked me, "You're up earlier than usual?" And I responded with, "Let's go to the 4th floor's balcony." She asked me why I wanted to do that, and I said it would be really fun, and then I grabbed her by her hand and took her upstairs. Once we got there, she made a few comments about the weather, and then I responded saying a simple word, "Jump." She, obviously scared and worried, couldn't believe what I was saying. And I kept insisting, "Jump, jump, jump." She claimed that I got pretty aggressive, at which point she went inside and came back to the dorm only to find me fast asleep. Her bloodshot eyes then made a lot more sense to me. This incident dates back to January 2011. I was studying for my MBA then, and one evening I got a call that my younger brother had met with an accident. Luckily, the hospital was just 10 minutes away from my college, so I rushed to go see him. My family members were all waiting outside the ICU and told me that his condition was pretty serious. A little while later, we were informed that he was out of danger. But after that, we started hearing him scream in agony like he was in a lot of pain. While my parents were talking to the doctors about this, I sneaked into his room. As soon as I entered, he stopped screaming. He said, "Isn't it your birthday today? Happy birthday." This surprised me, but even then I went and sat beside him. Then I asked him about how his accident occurred, and he seemed to have no answer as to how he fell off his bike. In the middle of this, he gets off his bed and starts limping towards the window. Imagine a man who was screaming in pain with bandages all over his body, getting up and walking. I asked him what he was doing and says, "Watch me." My younger brother was about to jump out of the 6th floor window of the hospital. Luckily, I ran towards him and tried to stop him. When I was able to take control, I yelled out to my parents and everybody pulled him in. By now, his face wasn't looking normal, and neither was he behaving in a normal manner. Later that day, he started chanting that if he stays in the hospital any longer, he will be dead. My mom decided to take action and take him home. He came home and napped, but when he woke up, he began behaving weirdly again. He was peeping through the windows in tears, and he told my mom she has come to get me. He then jumped out of the sofa and ran into the puja room and kept peeping outside. I gathered my courage and asked her who she was talking about. And he pointed towards the swing set outside and said, "She wants to take me." I couldn't see anyone out there. After some time, he calmed down, but not for too long. A little later, he stood on his toes in front of an open cupboard and started laughing very loudly. When we probed him over and over about this, he said that it was her who was laughing and not him. That night, I was awakened from my sleep by the feeling of someone tying up my toes. After a lot of deliberation, I opened my eyes to see what was going on and realized I was sleeping next to a woman who wasn't my mother. I screeched so loud that everybody at my place woke up. My parents dismissed it as my imagination, and we then began looking for my younger brother. We found him on the terrace talking to himself. When my mother asked him, he said, "I have to go tomorrow with her, so I was just talking about it." Following this, he began addressing himself as Aparna. My mother had had enough by this point and called the local priest. He told us that my brother has bought something with himself from the place he had his accident. We later learned that a girl who was just about to get married died at the same spot of his accident. In the end, we had to take my younger brother to an ashram in Gujarat, where he took months to become normal once again. I have lived in the Banasthali University premises during my childhood as my parents were working there. And in this time period, I have encountered quite a few paranormal activities. But this is the scariest one by far. I was in 4th standard. There was a huge, dense forest behind my house and we kids weren't allowed to go there. But one evening, we decided to explore the unexplored without telling our parents. We knew that there were wolves in the forest. But being kids, we thought of ourselves as superheroes with superpowers. Even as it was getting dark, we stayed there. It was a little adventure for us. But by now, I started getting negative vibes and started trying to convince everyone to go back. Suddenly, we heard the growl of the wolves. We were so scared, we couldn't move. From the back, we heard a woman say that this area wasn't for us, it was hers and her pets lived here. We turned around and saw an old lady with a terrible accident mark on her cheek. She wasn't wearing a black sari and had a bag in her hand. She asked us to leave and never return. We were terrified at this point and one of my friends even started crying. The old lady then gave us a handful of chocolates and asked us to leave again before the wolves come out. We agreed, but then she insisted we have the chocolates before we leave. I didn't have any, but a couple of the other kids did. She looked angry about it, and as we started to leave, she stopped 3 of us and said, "Don't sleep today." One of my friends innocently asked her why. She gave us a very evil smile and said that if we do, our worst fears will come true. After hearing that, we bolted from there. After that, we went to our usual hangout place and started talking about the incident and then went home. We forgot about the lady and I slept off as I had a test the next day. That night, I dreamt that I was going away from my parents in a car as if I am never going to come back. I saw my mom crying and hugging me while my father looked as if he will cry too. My mom wore a green suit and red dupatta while my father was wearing a tracksuit. As I sat in the back seat of the car, I looked back to wait for the last time my parents, but instead I saw none other than that old lady giving me that same vicious smile and waving. 3 months later, this nightmare came true. My parents decided to send me to my grandparents' home in Mathura after my 4th class annual exams for further study. That day my mom was wearing the same thing, and so was my dad. I was livid. After sitting in the back seat, when I looked back for the last time, I saw that woman instead of my parents. The same evil eyes, the same vicious smile, and the same waving. A while later, I got to know that Archie's mother passed away. When I returned to my hometown many years later, I inquired about what had happened. He revealed to me that he saw his mother dying in his dream that night. His fear was losing his mother and mine was getting separated from my family. The third boy Deepak didn't sleep that night, so nothing went wrong for him. It could be a coincidence, but I can't shake it off that all of this was that evil woman's doing. Even now, I see glimpses of her in my nightmares, and when I do, those come true. Back in 1991, when I was 5 or 6 years old, my father got a new job in a district called Faizabad. We were given a 2-bedroom flat in the factory housing complex. This house was old and had remained locked for the past 5 years. But since we were a bit hard-pressed for money, my dad had insisted that this locked flat should be allotted to us instead of waiting for another to be vacated in a year or so. Once we moved in here, things started to go seriously wrong. Initially, small things started to happen. Like every other night, we would hear footsteps or feel like somebody was jumping over the backyard wall and then heading to the roof. There was also a huge, strange burn mark on the bathroom wall. No matter how many times we painted over it, somehow it would peel off and the mark would become visible again. Once, my dad had to go on an urgent trip to a nearby town and it was just my mom, my sister, and me staying back. In the night, my mother shouted and ran to her bedroom and switched on all the lights. She was sweating and mumbling something. Both of us kids got scared. My mom somehow took control of the situation, opened the main door, and called the security guard. From what I overheard, my mother had sensed a half-man bird standing next to her bed and quietly staring at her. The security guard, who was scared too, agreed to go around the house and look, but he couldn't find anything. This episode was then brushed aside. After this, the number of strange occurrences increased in our house. Like the taps would randomly turn on and the lights would flicker even when we weren't touching the switches. But the most horrifying incident happened on a cold night in December. I remember sleeping in my room with my sister on a bed covered with a mosquito net. A bulb was lit in the bathroom, so there was plenty of light to look around. In the middle of the night, I woke up feeling very restless. I felt like something was moving under the bed. I looked at my sister and she was fast asleep. And then I saw something that knocked the life out of me. A burnt arm was extending from under the bed and caressing my head. The hand had only 3 thick fingers, and as it moved, the mosquito net was also moving with it. I couldn't move. From the corner of my eye, I could just see the burnt hand moving. I was frozen. After a few seconds or a few minutes, the hand went away and I covered myself in my blanket and broke down. The entire night, I felt something crawling under the bed and making a weird hissing noise. After this incident, we moved out of the house and into the company guest house. We later got to know the previous tenant of the house was a chemical engineer who lived there with his family. Once, while he was on a business trip, he had an accident and died. While his dead body was en route to the same house in the complex, his father locked himself in the bathroom and immolated himself. The burn mark was from the same incident. 2 bodies were cremated that day. One of that engineer and the other one of his father who committed suicide. That was 5 years before my father joined the company, and the house had remained locked all this time. After hearing the story of that guy, I could make the connection. Maybe that hand was of his burnt father who might still be looking for his son. May they both rest in peace.